Shall we continue then? My name is Barbara Lindeke. I'm past president and board member of St. Paul Audubon, and was fortunate enough to see the book launch that the Nelsons provided last fall when we could still be in person, and bought a copy of the book, and I'm glad to share it with folks, and I know you'll enjoy hearing about it. With Darby and Jerry Nelson is John Hickman tonight, who is a lover of the Minnesota River and a filmmaker who's done films for NBC about the river, and was on the governor's commission that was concerned with the health of the river, Minnesota River. So it'll be interesting to hear John's perspective too. And then we'll hear from Jerry and Darby about their travels on the river and their report. So John, if you'd like to start us off.
Certainly, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be presenting to Audubon. I was on the board of the Minneapolis chapter and the newsletter editor for 8 years back in the 80s and early 90s. And as was mentioned, I'm a longtime advocate for the Minnesota River and active in the conservation movement. And that's how I knew about Darby Nelson long before I met him. He is the guy who everybody in the conservation community looked up to. He's extremely active with groups like Conservation Minnesota and the Freshwater Society. He's a professor emeritus in biology from Anoka Ramsey Community College. He served 3 terms in the Minnesota legislature. He was a charter member of the Lessard Sams Outdoor Heritage Council, which makes recommendations to the legislature for how the legacy tax dollars are to be spent. And on top of all of that, he wrote a magnificent book, which was published in 2012 called For Love of Lakes. It's a real masterpiece, and I highly recommend it. So when I heard that Darby was writing a book about the Minnesota River, I was absolutely thrilled, because I'm getting a funny message. I guess we're okay. I was thrilled Darby was writing a book about the Minnesota River, because I knew from my experience that many of his peers in the conservation community in Minnesota and the Twin Cities in particular took a real dim view of the Minnesota River. They thought it was a lost cause. They thought people who are working to improve it were not making any progress. And I knew that message was not true. And I knew that if Darby Nelson was writing a book about the Minnesota River, then all of those people were going to be reading that book, and they would have to take another look at their own views of the river. And being a professional writer, I offered to help in any way possible in getting the book published. And so I sought out Darby, and that's when I found out that Darby really had a partner in all of those things that I mentioned about him. And that, of course, is his wife, Jerry. And Jerry is a retired high school biology teacher, science teacher herself. She helped develop the standards for public schools in Minnesota. And I learned that she was Darby's typist and his first editor of his drafts. And as I said, a real partner in his work, including his writing. So with that, I will turn it over to Jerry Nelson.
Thanks, John. I don't know how our internet is doing here. It seems like
You're looking good.
Am I coming through? When Darby was writing For Love of a River in Minnesota, he began to experience the effects of cognitive impairment. But he was able to finish the first draft. He wrote the whole manuscript. But when it came to doing the final edits and the refinements that are absolutely necessary in any book, he had a hard time saying, okay, is this way of saying this better than this way? And so we turned to our friend John Hickman, and he agreed to help edit the book and bring it to publication, which he did. So Darby's farther into Alzheimer's now than he was before, but he's still Darby, and we're still paddling companions for life. And but I have to do most of the talking, and he'll nudge me if he has something to say. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's look at the PowerPoint. Let's see here. There's no slideshow from the beginning. Okay. So actually, I guess I was going to do this first, wasn't I, John? So here's the cover of the book, although our pictures are covering it up here. I never know where to have this. Put it on the bottom, I think. And let's go to the next slide. So as we were paddling the river, we were aware that we were traveling the Dakota Water Trail, Minnesota Makote, through land stolen from them in treaties in 1851 and 1858. At the confluence of Mississippi, their sacred creation land, Bedote, in 1805. Darby learned the sad history of the Dakota-US War in 6th grade as his teacher in Morton prepared the students to welcome the Lower Sioux students from the Birch Coulee School in 7th grade. He spent a lot of time at the Birch Coulee Battlefield and Park, and that strongly figured in his life. The Chief Wabasha bust at the state capitol that you see here, one of his descendants was in Darby's class and was there for the dedication, and it was in the 80s when Darby was in the legislature. And so that has a special meaning to him. So we honor today's Dakota people, their ancestors and descendants, and the land itself. So the Minnesota River meanders through a huge valley. We're standing on one edge of the valley on the right-hand picture, and you can see the other end there. It's 2 miles wide in some places, and has some beautiful meanders like this. You probably are aware that the valley was carved out from the draining of Lake Agassiz, which you see here, and just look at how huge it was compared to Hudson Bay and to Lake Superior. And at the point at the little bulge in Minnesota here, on the western boundary, there was a break in the dam that was
It's on.
holding it up, and the water poured out and carved this huge valley in which the Minnesota now travels. So we started paddling the river from Browns Valley there at the bulge, to the confluence with the Mississippi. We did it in several chunks, and it's because we didn't want to, we'd be out for 5 to 7 days and then get home, and Darby would write and really process it so that we weren't doing it all at once. Otherwise, we would have forgotten way too much. Big Stone Lake is right there, and the Little Minnesota drains into Big Stone Lake and is the true source of the river. And John is going to read about the pelicans that we encountered on Big Stone Lake.
After a few miles of paddling, we notice a narrow point of land projecting out into the lake. There is a sandbar just off the point, and it is covered with huge white birds, American white pelicans. I do a quick count and estimate there must be at least 60 of these magnificent creatures with their preposterous yet practical pouched bills. I am thrilled, but not surprised to find them here. They are drawn to large lakes. All stand stoically, staring at us. They start to fidget, uncertain as to our intentions. We keep our distance. Any closer, and the flock could take flight. While I would love to admire their 9-foot wingspans in action, I don't want them to waste precious calories just to distance themselves from us, so we back away. Pelicans settle down, and we watch them through binoculars.
Okay, John, keep on going here.
Yes, speaking of pelicans, I wanted to make sure all of you St. Paul Auduboners were aware of a wonderful book, the Minnesota River Valley Birding Trail. And the photo on the right, you can see those little red spots. We're up in the near the headwaters here where Darby and Jerry saw the pelicans. And there's actually over 130 sites listed in the book. And this was a real joint effort. As you can see, it was published by Audubon, Minnesota. And many, many people had their hands in it. But I have to give credit to one person in particular, Bob Williams, who really got the idea off the ground and saw it through to completion. And if you're still skeptical that there's good birding in the Minnesota River Valley, you might be persuaded by a blurb on the back of the book. It's written by Al Batt. And he says, "Why go birding along the Minnesota River? Because it's where the birds are. The Minnesota River might be the best place to bird. While there, you will quickly become lost in birding revelry. Do not fret. You will be able to use the river to find your way back to civilization. Don't major in minor things. Channel your inner Roger Tory Peterson and bird the Minnesota River. Life is made of moments, and birding along the Minnesota River will give your life wings to fly like a swallow in a high sky." And so we just have a few pictures. Some were taken by Darby and Jerry, some by, as you can see, birding enthusiast and all around good guy from New Ulm named Ron Baldwin. Darby and Jerry were seeing bald eagles every single day they were out on the water. I live about a mile from the river myself in Bloomington, and I saw a bald eagle this morning when I was out walking the dog. We talk about river lakes. The top of the Minnesota River is Big Stone Lake, and it's where Big Stone National Wildlife Refuge is. And then because of the natural topography and geography, and because of dams, soon after Big Stone Lake is Marsh Lake, and then Lac qui Parle, which is French for the lake that talks. And it's all those Canada geese and other waterfowl that are doing the talking on Lac qui Parle. And you can see this best if you're paddling, of course, but even if you just are driving across a bridge on the Minnesota River, and you know, get out and take a look under the bridge, and you're likely to see nests of cliff swallows. And one of Darby and Jerry's favorite birds, one of mine too, the yellow-headed blackbird. You don't see them too often right in the metro here, but they're out on the prairie.
And tell them how they sound.
I wish I could try to make us. They sound like a New York City cab with laryngitis, I guess. There's cormorants everywhere. This one, you don't often get to see them when they're just sitting around. But John White is a wonderful photographer from the Ortonville area. Another bird you don't often get to see on the ground, turkey vultures. The Minnesota River Valley Birding Trail book says that there are 270 species of birds in the Minnesota River Basin. So, you know, you can practically get to your 300 count just with birds in the Minnesota River area. Wood ducks, of course. And great blue herons, you'll see. That's a real typical shot from what I understand of when you're paddling by, they're along the river's edge. And I think the next one might be the great egret, which I think should be called the Audubon egret. The two pictures with the brown kind of coloring are from the Old Cedar Avenue bridge area, as are these trumpeter swans. Oh, and then we get to Granite Falls, is a town about, I'd say 75 miles or so south of the source of the river. And you're looking really at downtown Granite Falls. That's a dam that was put in to generate electricity. And the pelicans just congregate there. So there's also a pedestrian bridge across the river. And naturally, Darby and Jerry had to portage around this dam. And I'll read just a little bit about how they managed after they were on the other side of the dam and ready to get back in the water. A steep slope drops off from the edge of the park to the river, making it a bit dicey to carry the canoe down to the water. But we're wearing sensible shoes and all goes well. As we load the canoe on a strand of sand, I see a huge mass of fingernail clams, apparently brought together by currents. I suspect catfish must be frequent visitors to this site. The roiling current below the dam splays itself broadly across the river, revealing rock-studded places that call for caution. Jerry, in the bow, can spot danger ahead, while I, in the stern, am responsible for steering. A rapid dialogue ensues as we make our way through the hazards. Jerry is very skilled at her task, and over the years, I've become proficient at following instructions. We zip through to calmer water. We are seeing at least one eagle every day, not surprising given the abundance of fish in the river. Carp are jumping and splashing all around us. Eagles are actually one of the more common avian sightings on the river, yet they command one's attention every time. Less than a mile downstream, we run into our first real rapids, actually what we call a rock garden, with rocks scattered hither and yon at or just below the surface. The current isn't particularly strong, but the obstacles are ubiquitous. And despite our best efforts, the canoe gets wedged sideways between two boulders. We are able to stand on them and free the canoe with no problem, aside from getting our sensible shoes soaked.
What's going on here? I'm not moving. Okay, Darby grew up in Morton, and this is the home of his heart. And so it was a real thrill to come by river to Darby's hometown rather than by the highway. We have gone to Morton every year since I met him because he just has to connect with this very special place. The outcrops behind the school are now the scientific and natural area. The playground behind the school where he spent many hours with his friends in the old quarries and on the rock outcrops. We got to Mankato where there's this weird bend in the river. Let's see if I can. Here comes the river, coming from the southwest, and all of a sudden that Mankato right here goes northeast. And nobody's really been, the geologists have never really been able to explain this phenomenon for sure. But at Mankato, we have the Lesueur River coming in, as you see, and just a short distance away, the Blue Earth River comes in as well. And the Watonwan is a tributary of the Blue Earth. And these three tributaries are major sources of sediment for the Minnesota River, which you know is one of the major problems in the Minnesota River. And you can see why with these big cliffs that erode away, especially with the strong storms that we've been having in the last several years. So we went up the Lesueur River for quite a ways and saw some other paddlers coming on down and in kayaks. They're really miles of fun paddling on the Minnesota River tributaries as well as the Minnesota River itself. So let's see what we did on the river on these trips that we took over several years. Besides enjoying the silence of a morning fog, it was really pretty easy paddling on the Peaceful River, although we always chose times when the river was relatively low. We didn't want to deal with the flood stage as much because we needed to have places to camp on sandbars, and we didn't want to be in that strong current. There were just a few rapids. We saw the one at Grand Falls, Patterson Rapids. We had to walk through because it was low enough water that we couldn't avoid the rocks. We portaged around Carver Rapids, but it turned out we probably could have run it. And then there are several easy riffles along the way. Some were marked on the DNR map that we didn't find any fast water at all, but this was one of the nice ones. So here are the sandbars that we camped on and our gear. Simple tents. We've, in all the paddling we've done, we've got our gear pretty much down to a science, so we don't have anything extra. We were testing the water clarity regularly along this trip. We got from the PCA Secchi tube, which we own a Secchi disc that we use in lakes, and we did in the lakes in the Minnesota River. But the Secchi tube is similar. You fill the tube with water from the river, and then there's a little tiny Secchi disc here, black and white squares or quadrants, and you lower that down until you can't see it anymore, and then you pull it up until you can see it anymore, and average those two. So we were able to kind of get a feeling for the clarity of the water. We were always checking for compliance with the buffer rules, and you can see on the left that the lawn to the edge of the river is the worst kind of stewardship you can have. And this farmer on the left had a nice buffer with native grasses that would hold the soil nicely and keep the bank in place. Often he couldn't see where, up above the bank. And Darby, in his infinite curiosity, had to climb, even if it was an impossible climb to make. And so here he is a couple of times going up a bank that I would never have tried, that's for sure. So we looked for good landings and places to sit. And Darby would stop often and either from the canoe or on shore, spend some time writing in his journal so that he would remember all the details of what we were experiencing. We ate simple food. My homemade granola and really a campfire, but almost all the time we used our stove, which was faster and a little bit more environmentally sound. So these are illustrations from the book. We have a love for mussels. Our grandson, George, fell in love with mussels too on a field trip that he went to. On the lower left here is the yellow-headed blackbird, which is our favorite. And we're happy to know that, to find out that the Minneopa State Park near Mankato now has bison. And we loved seeing the soft-shelled turtles, but boy, they sure splashed into the water right away. Darby is not a good fisherman. He inherits from his dad, and but he did. I just found this picture from a very early trip where he actually did wet a line. I don't think he caught anything though. Do you think? I don't think so. But all along the river, we were seeing fishers, and we always talked to them, and they told us about the excellent walleye and flathead fishing, flathead channel and flathead catfish fishing. But you never know what you're going to catch when you're in a river like the Minnesota. Freshwater drum, paddlefish, carp, sturgeon, gar, bowfins, American eel, bullheads, white bass. The DNR has counted 102 species of fish in the Minnesota River. So that's pretty exceptional. The last leg of our journey was from Le Sueur to the Mississippi. And this is our daughter Robin and granddaughter Hallie, who's now 10. But aren't they the cutest kids in the world? I just love this picture. And they brought us to the start of the trip and then left the car for us at the end at Fort Snelling. And we got down to the head of barge navigation. And we're able to talk to a tugboat captain who was happy to tell us all about his job and watch the barges being filled. It was really it was very interesting part of the river. Not, you know, it's not the more almost wilderness experience that we experienced upriver, but it was still interesting. And as we approached the confluence at Bdote, and we had very loud airplanes flying overhead, and went under the freeway bridges. And this is the boat landing where we came back to after we got to here, which is where the Minnesota meets the Mississippi River at Pike Island, Fort Snelling State Park, or Bdote. And this was a dream come true for Darby. He had dreamed about this since he was in elementary school, and really felt a great sense of satisfaction to actually have completed the entire length of the river. From here we went to the Pine Bend Bluffs Scientific and Natural Area. If you haven't been there, it's really an excellent and just a beautiful place to visit. It overlooks the Mississippi soon after the Minnesota joins it. And we came here to just sit and ponder what we learned on our trip. And John is going to read a little piece from that.
From the top of Pine Bend's bluff, Jerry and I take one last look at the river below. I feel as though I'm at least beginning to form an understanding of rock and ice, river and land, soil and lakes, and for 11,500 years of humans, a communion of the whole. We turn back toward the parking lot at just the right time to see a pair of bald eagles flying high above the bluff. Within my lifetime, I have witnessed the decline of eagles to the point of near extinction, and the revival of their population to the point that they are a common sight along the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. We saved the bald eagle, and we can save the Minnesota River.
So I just like to tell you a little bit about the other chapters besides these paddling chapters. It starts out with the foundation of the glacial and geology, the tremendous soils that are in the Minnesota River, the people both now and long ago, the Dakota-US War, and the transformation of the land from prairie and big woods to farmland, basically. There are also 6 Voices for the River chapters that are stories of advocates that have worked to improve the quality of the Minnesota River. They're really a very, very inspiring stories that I'm sure you'll enjoy. As an aquatic house, Darby could ignore the lakes in the basin, and we visited 40 lakes and divided them into 3 groups. So there are more lakes in the basin than most people realize, and I think over 1,000 lakes down there, and you don't have to go north to enjoy some nice lake travel. So let's just take a look at why the Minnesota is so especially vulnerable to the pollution that we see here in this iconic picture at Pike Island, and as the Minnesota comes into the Mississippi. First of all, Minnesota is a geologically young river that is cutting through glacial till. There's lots of sediment there that is going to erode naturally. And so, you know, it's not all human caused. It's just the geology of the place. The white settlers cut down the big woods to provide building material and carve out farmland. There's only 1% of the big woods that's left in our state. Fertile prairie soils produce outstanding crops.
Hey, John, are you frozen?
I'm not. Should I continue here? I don't know that I can. I can't make the slides move, but
No, she might be back. Oh, that's too bad.
Ben, did you see the note about asking people who are in the meeting to turn their videos off? And that can help?
All right, I'm on it. I don't even have to ask people. Yeah, there's only 5 or 6.
Am I?
Does Jerry, do you know that
Back?
you're frozen?
Well, I know that it was out. I had to rejoin.
Okay,
So just
that should help too.
rejoin, and I've just knocked off about 8 or 9 video feeds, so that'll help.
Okay, my connection, the internet connection is unstable. Let's see, start my video.
There they are.
Okay, can you hear me too?
Yep.
Gotta get you off of the,
Yep, we're good.
okay, so this is what tiling looks like, which it was new to
gotta
me.
share your screen again, Jerry.
Okay. Is that on now?
Nope.
Let's see, all I have is this.
Do you have the green share screen at the bottom? No hurry, it'll connect. You got plenty of time.
Okay, let's see here. All I see is my screen. Now wait.
I'm gonna take back the screen and then see if you can share it back.
Okay.
Maybe I am. All
Got
right,
some notification on.
I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna see if you can reshare yours.
Maybe I should escape this. Oh, okay, there I got that back.
I have a copy of the program if you can't get it to go.
Um,
That might work. You have her PowerPoint?
Essentially, yes, I have it in a PDF format, but I can do it.
We could glance at that. That would work.
Okay, let's see here. That
I don't
means
know how to get
share my
back.
screen.
Okay, now I got this. Okay, I think I might be back here. I think I seem to be back now.
You're back. Your screen share, your PowerPoint is not.
Okay, I can get that, I think.
Ah, looks like it's coming.
Yay.
Okay,
You're back, Jerry.
so that's the tile. That's what the tile looks like, and we've got an awful lot of that in the Minnesota River Basin. And what that does basically is rushes water to the river rather than keeping it on the land. And moving water quickly off the land increases our flooding. Are we okay?
Yep.
Henderson residents can't get to their homes in some floods, some Henderson residents. And many farmers have given up farming on their floodplain because they lose a crop more often. Factories used to dump a lot of waste, and municipalities dumped sewage into the river. Most of that has been cleaned up, so we're not in that. That's not such a problem now. So what more can we do to improve the quality of the Minnesota River? You can plant rain gardens in the city or the country. This is our rain garden a few years ago when it was just getting started. Keep your storm drains clean because that water goes pretty directly to the river. Fix septic systems and maintain sewage treatment facilities that are near the river. Adopt agricultural best practices. Cover crops are being found to really enrich the soil and keep the soil on the land rather than having it blow away or wash away. No-till, like the right side of that picture, is very helpful to keep the soil there. Buffers you see on the bottom here around a drainage ditch. Precision farming to prevent nitrogen, phosphorus, and pesticides from washing away into the water. Converting floodplains to perennial cover with CREP or other programs. And most of all, keeping that water on the land. Scott Sparlin, the leader of the Minnesota River Congress, was at a committee hearing, I think it was yesterday or the day before, lobbying for this legislation. So watch for this and please send some letters of support to help the legislators get this. It almost passed last year, but then COVID took over everything, so it didn't get through. So it's what we do on land. And if you were at the launch a year ago, Scott Sparlin was there singing the song, "It's time we all understand. It's what we do on land that makes our water what it is today. That room is controlled by me and you. It's time to fix the mistakes of yesterday." And John, will you read that section off the epilogue?
This is the last paragraph of the book. And Darby writes, "I spent my formative years on the Minnesota River and fell in love with it. And I have spent a good portion of my retirement years striving to get better acquainted with it, searching to understand why this river occupies such a powerful place in my heart and soul. There are places along the Minnesota River every bit as beautiful as anything I've seen in the Boundary Waters. Exploring the river by canoe is facilitated by numerous landing sites, campsites, and the detailed DNR water trails maps. The fishing is great, and the most significant events in the history of the state of Minnesota, the forced displacement of the native population and conversion of the landscape to the commodity-based agriculture that formed our economy, took place in the Minnesota River Basin. My motivation in writing this book has been to help people learn about and appreciate the river I love. Awareness comes first, which leads to appreciation, which leads to a commitment to act. I invite you to get out and spend some time on the Minnesota River. You might just fall in love."
So here's the cover of the book. You can find out more on Darby's website, darbynelson.com, and facebook.com, Darby Nelson Books. If you know, the books are available at bookstores, Amazon, and if you want a signed one, just let us know and we can arrange for that. So we're open to questions now, and hopefully we still have people here. I don't know if we had more trouble than I had here, but
60 people still sitting in the room. And
all right.
if anyone does have questions, if you could put them in the chat room First question in, what is the title of the legislation that you mentioned? What are we looking for?
Looking to turn off my phone here. Good question. I don't have that.
Okay.
But we could find out and send it to you.
Okay. We do have an action page on the St. Paul Audubon website that we could post it. If people are interested in that, that would be great. Might send it to Barb and then she can get it to us.
Okay. Yep.
What was the distance that you paddled from top to bottom?
324, is that right, John?
Wow.
About 324 miles.
Yes, it
The difference-
varies, as you saw in that one picture of the meandering Minnesota. The valley is so wide because of how the river was created that there's a lot of space for the river to meander. So it changes the distance. But the latest I saw was 335 miles.
Sure. I won't hold you to it exactly. Wow, that's amazing. Another question, how deep does the river tend to be? Is that
Yeah. It varies a lot. You know, on the outside bends, it's the deepest because the current is the strongest there. And on inside bends, where the sandbars tend to form, it's much shallower. So, yeah, I don't know that we could, you know, it's like any river. It's got some deep spots and some shallower spots. I suppose the fishermen along the river could tell us better than we could.
That's another thing that, you know, varies
Some of
considerably. And
we went back just
right now, you know, the river is extremely low, and you can kind of see Carver Rapids a little bit. That's in the Rapids Lake unit of the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. And the river is low now, and you can see the rocks there. There's other times, of course, when the river is full to overflowing and there's terrible floods. So it varies a lot from season to season and from year to year based on precipitation.
we could see vegetation that was caught up on the trees, you know, high above the river. I mean, 16 feet, I'm sure. It was just amazing how, you know, you could tell and then as the water would go down, it was amazing how quickly some plants would come on the sandbars. And boy, the plants are well adapted to that environment.
Sure. Next question, can you discuss the effects of the silt load from the Minnesota River onto Lake Pepin or other parts of the upper Mississippi?
It's mostly Lake Pepin, and we've known about this for a lot of years. It's been filling in Lake Pepin for a long time, and the people that live there are, you know, really concerned about it, or have cabins along the way, and for the travel on that, you know, the barge travel as well. So, John, tell me about the exchange that went on between the farmers and the people in Lake Pepin area and the farmers in the basin.
Yeah, we tell that story in the book in the chapter about Voice of the River. Patrick Moore, river activist from Western Minnesota. He lives in Montevideo, and he started what he called the Upstream Downstream Friendship Tour. And he hooked up with Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance and got a bus full of farmers and other people from the western part of the state, and they came down to Red Wing and learned about the concerns of the people there. And then the people from Lake Pepin came out and visited some farms in the upper part of the Minnesota River Basin. And it was excellent undertaking and led to some long-term cooperation between these two groups, which tend to be contentious a lot of the time. So in my opinion, that's really what it's all about, is people working together. And as Patrick famously said, let's find out what we agree on and work on that. And I'll just mention here that I'm putting into the chat the information about the bill,
Oh, good.
the legislation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. And we'll get that posted on the website too.
I'm gonna stop my share here now, okay? Maybe, oh yeah, here. So we can see people better.
All right.
So Jerry, can you say more about the head of navigation and the barge traffic, and what are they hauling up there?
Oh boy, they're hauling lots of stuff. It's corn and soybeans, of course.
Yeah,
Salt is coming in for the
winter.
roads, and fertilizer coming up, and those are the obvious ones. But John, you know of others? I know there's an awful lot of stuff coming up and down.
How far up do the barges go?
Shakopee,
The Minnesota River from Savage, where all the grain elevators are, it's, I think, about 13 or 15 river miles to the Mississippi. And that part of the Minnesota River is actually officially part of Pool 2 of the Mississippi River. And the facility was built in World War II. The government wanted ships to be built in the middle of the country, and Cargill volunteered or signed up to do that. And that's how the navigation channel was put in originally. And when the war was over, then Cargill converted over for grain. And it's a major benefit for all of the agricultural products that come from the Minnesota River Basin can be delivered there and put on barges rather than driving all the way over to the Mississippi River.
Okay.
A couple other questions come in. If the bluffs are mainly soil, are there also some rocky bluffs? If so, what kind?
Yeah, it's mostly soil, but in the upper part of the river, there is granite and Morton gneiss. I didn't talk much about the Morton gneiss, which is the most beautiful rock in the world, I think. Rainbow granite is another name of it. But that is below Granite Falls, and it really looks like the Boundary Waters. It's just really rock, bedrock outcrops there, and really quite lovely.
And
a lot of it is shorter, shorter banks. I think the biggest banks are mostly on those tributary rivers.
And the the tributary rivers before the Lake Agassiz Dam burst and carved out the Minnesota River Valley, all the tributaries were on the same level as the little bitty Minnesota River. And then when the raging currents came through and carved out the valley, all of a sudden those tributaries were much higher, and they had to try to find their way back down to that level. And there are places where there is bedrock, like at Minneopa State Park. We had one picture there of the waterfall there, and there are quite a few waterfalls in the Minnesota River Basin, and that's where where there is bedrock exposed, and it does not erode nearly as fast as the glacial till. So there's a lot of beautiful waterfalls in the Minnesota River Basin. Redwood Falls,
Redwood
Granite
Falls is
Falls.
Yeah.
Sure. On the question of the silt again, what's the contribution of the Minnesota River and its nitrogen load on the dead zone down at the mouth of the Mississippi? And how much has tiling made that worse?
It's huge, a huge contribution. And I think we saw an amount at one point, but numbers don't stick in my head, and I don't expect Darby remembers it either, right?
Well,
do we have it in there?
Lake Pepin is kind of a settling point for sediment. Plenty of sediment gets deposited before it gets to Lake Pepin, but a lot makes it all the way down to Lake Pepin. And they've been able to do studies to identify the source of the sediment that's filling in Lake Pepin. And they say that 80% of that comes from the Minnesota River Basin. And almost all of that, as Jerry referred to during the presentation, comes from that Mankato area, the Blue Earth and Le Sueur and Watonwan rivers, because of the geography and the soil types. That's where most of the sediment comes from.
So if I could interject a question, because somewhere along the line you mentioned that there was good fishing along the river, and how does that work out with all this sediment and pollution in the water? Isn't that somehow inhibiting the fish?
Yeah, I'll take that, Jerry. The fishing is a whole lot better than it used to be. And that's because the river conditions have improved. And so, whereas before then, there was a study done where they were seining the river for fish, and they weren't finding anything except peas and corn from the local canning factories. The river was essentially dead, but there have been a lot of restoration efforts made, especially over the last 30 years or so. And Jerry mentioned CREP, that's the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That put into permanent easement fully 1/2 of the floodplain of the Minnesota River Basin. So that's in permanent protection now with perennial crops, and the water quality is better in the river than it used to be.
Jerry?
Yes.
Did you run into any factory farms and factory farm issues?
We didn't see any of that from the river. So I'm not sure about how close they are, although I know there has been some controversy about keeping
Treating the
that
sewage
fire,
and
and I know
stuff.
that's a major problem. Yeah,
But you didn't smell any or have any
no,
awareness of them.
there was only one time when we were near a trailer court. And there was obviously some toilet waste in the water, and the smell was terrible. But
Yeah.
a week later, we were back there and it was gone. So I don't know if it was, you know, a leakage from the septic system or what the problem was.
It was straight line.
But we did. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm sure in the last 30 years, I'm sure the sewage treatment's gotten way better all up and down the river.
yeah. There's been a lot of point pollution that's been
Mhm.
rectified.
Yeah, the municipal sewage systems in every incorporated town and city along the river has been brought into compliance.
Just a note for people as they start dropping off, this presentation is recorded and will be up on the website, available for any friends or family that missed it or that you wanted to forward. We'll get that up there.
Just want to say thank you very much. This was very informative. Learned a lot. I grew up also on the Minnesota River, so I'm Redwood Falls. So thank you.
All right,
Very cool.
Alexander Ramsey Park.
Yeah. Well, that park and the waterfalls from the Redwood River are so gorgeous there.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you
We do want-
very, very much.
We do want to thank you very much, all three of you, for taking the time and sharing this important story with us. We all need to know the Minnesota better.
That's right. It's our namesake river.
Yep.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe. Have a great holiday.
Happy holidays to everybody.
And we'll see you in February. No speaker series in January.
Thank you, St. Paul
Everybody buy the
Audubon.
books.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
thanks,
you. You have
Fran.
wonderful memories, don't you?
We sure do.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darby.
Tammy, I'll
Yeah.
report.
Thank you, Ben.
No problem.
Bye, Jerry. Bye, Darby.
Good to see
Bye,
you,
Barb.
Tammy.
And
Darby,
way to go, Anoka Hennepin. Hey, where was that
Yep.
building in Anoka that had, did that have the Morton Neist? It was pictured on the
It
same
did.
page. Which building is that?
Yeah, it was it's right, it's the one that that used to be the bank. It's right on Second and Main.
Okay, yeah,
And,
that's what I thought it was.
It's now that we had that,
It's a clothing
pet
store or
thing, pet
something now,
something.
or, yeah,
well, it's across the street from the clothing store.
okay,
So
good.
it's lots of places in Minneapolis you will see, wherever you see gorgeous marble looking, that's Morton Nice.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Hmm.
Well,
Darby?
Yeah, let me just jump in a little bit. And that is, I grew up in Morton,
yeah,
and I felt that place. I couldn't, it would just, I grew up in there, and it would just, I'll never forget that. And I demanded that once a year,
Yep.
at least,
At least.
we're going back.
yeah,
And the beauty of doing this book was that we got back several times a year, during the writing of the book.
Sure.
So that was great.
No, that's
Darby was happy.
awesome.
yeah. I was asking about the depth of the river because my Jerry's son Kurt, Jerry Wagner, and my stepson Kurt, canoed it one summer with a friend. And apparently they were getting hung up all the time and beached on sandbars and stuck and having to wade a lot. And it
Yeah.
got them frustrated. This was back in the 80s, I think.
Yeah, well, the water level sure fluctuates a lot, and
Yeah.
if you get in when it's pretty low, it could be
Sure.
some of those little rapids. I'm sure would be a problem. You'd probably be walking them.
Yeah, you said you got stuck on some rocks in below the what is it, Granite Falls, was it?
Yeah, there were two rocks kind of close together, and we got wedged in, but we were able to step out on them and then pull the canoe out. So it worked fine. We've
Yeah,
done that before.
that stepson Kurt had a hell of a time on the kettle getting wrapped around a rock and
Ooh,
practically
boy.
killed them. They had a real adventure. But they
Yeah, that's a
so
much more dangerous river than the Minnesota.
well, he learned that. That's why he and his friend chose the Minnesota after they got the canoe fixed, which was much
Mm.
calmer. So,
Yeah.
well, good to see you guys and happy holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for having us.
thanks a
Stay safe.
lot.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ben.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.